At 4:53 in the afternoon on April 20th, 2026, the ocean floor off the Sanriku coast of northeastern Japan tore itself apart. The Japan Meteorological Agency measured it at magnitude 7. 7, the United States Geological Survey put it at 7. 4, the difference between those two numbers is not a disagreement. It is a reflection of how difficult it is to measure something this large. What is not in dispute is what happened in the seconds that followed. Sirens across 182 municipalities, from Hokkaido in the north all the way down to Chiba Prefecture just east of Tokyo, began sounding simultaneously. The Japan Meteorological Agency issued a tsunami warning for Iwate Prefecture, then Aomori, then Hokkaido. The predicted wave height was up to 3 meters, roughly 10 feet, moving toward a coastline that already knows exactly what that means. The Tohoku Shinkansen bullet train line connecting Tokyo to the north was suspended immediately due to power outages. Every local train in Iwate Prefecture halted. Workers were evacuated from the Fukushima Daiichi and Fukushima Daini nuclear plants. Tens of thousands of people were ordered to higher ground. And in Tokyo, 300 miles to the south, residents in high-rise buildings felt their floors move. But that is not even the real story, not even close. The real story is not those waves. The real story is not the evacuations, not the suspended trains, not the power outages that hit somewhere in the range of 2 million households across the affected region. The real story is what that earthquake is telling us about the system it belongs to, about the precise geological architecture that produced it, about the sequence of events that the best seismologists in Japan are watching right now with an attention that most of the world does not understand, because the last time a magnitude 7 class earthquake struck the Sanriku coast and was followed by a quiet week. That quiet week turned out to be only 2 days long. And when the silence ended, 15,295 people were dead. Let us start with the geography, because you need to picture this. Off the northeastern coast of Japan, beneath water that runs cold and deep, there is a scar in the ocean floor called the Japan Trench. It is not a distant geological curiosity on the other side of the world. It runs parallel to the Japanese coast at a distance of roughly 200 to 300 kilometers. To put that in perspective, the distance from London to Paris is about 340 kilometers. The Japan Trench is that close to one of the most densely populated coastlines on Earth. And along its entire length, it is doing something that has been happening for millions of years, which is consuming the Pacific Plate. The Pacific Plate, an enormous slab of ocean floor roughly the size of the continental United States, is grinding westward and downward, plunging beneath the Okhotsk microplate on which the Japanese archipelago sits, at a convergence rate of between 9 and 9, 2 centimeters per year, 9 centimeters, 9. That is the length of a standard ballpoint pen. But what is moving at that speed is not a pen, it is a tectonic plate. And what happens at the boundary where it dives under Japan is not a smooth, orderly process. It is a collision, a compression, a locking. And where the plates lock, stress accumulates, not for months, not for years, for centuries. The earthquake of April 20th, 2026 occurred along this boundary. The USGS determined it was caused by thrust faulting at a depth of 35 kilometers, which is the geological signature of 2 plates grinding together at a subduction interface, the downgoing plate lurching forward, the overriding plate snapping upward, and the seafloor displacing enough water to generate a wave. The Japan Meteorological Agency issued its formal advisory language within hours, and that language deserves to be read slowly, because it is the language of institutional caution trying to communicate something that the words themselves are almost not large enough to hold. The JMA declared off the coast of Hokkaido and Sanriku subsequent earthquake advisory, warning of the possibility of a stronger earthquake. The chance of a megaquake exceeding magnitude 8, they stated, had risen to 1%, not 10%, not 50%, 1%, 1 in 100. And the JMA was explicit that this was a tenfold increase over the normal background probability of 0. 1%. This advisory would remain in effect until April 27th. The Cabinet Office held a press conference. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi appeared on national television and urged 182 municipalities of Japanese citizens to confirm their designated shelters, their evacuation routes, and to check their emergency bags so they can run immediately when a megaquake hits. Not if, when. This is not the first time the system has spoken in recent months. It is not the second time. In December of 2025, a magnitude 7, 6 earthquakes struck off the coast of Aomori Prefecture. The JMA issued the same advisory. Tsunami waves reached 70 centimeters at Kuji Port in Iwate. More than 40 people were injured. The advisory was lifted a week later after the elevated risk window passed without a larger event. The system held. The stress remained. And then on April 20th, 2026, 4 months later, the same boundary ruptured again, this time magnitude 7. 7. This time the tsunami reached 80 centimeters at Kuji port. This time, 6 people were killed, dozens more injured, 39 buildings damaged in Aomori Prefecture alone. This time, the JMA issued the same advisory again. The clock reset, the window reopened, and the scientists who monitor this boundary for a living went back to watching their instruments with the particular kind of attention that people give a system they know is capable of much, much more. Because here is what the data actually shows. The April 20th, 2026 earthquake and the December 2025 earthquake and the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and every major rupture along the Sanriku coast, going back to the 869 Sanriku event more than 1,000 years ago, are not separate stories. They are not isolated events along a passive coastline. They are chapters in a single continuous geological narrative, and that narrative has a structure. The Pacific Plate does not stop pushing because of magnitude 7. 7 earthquake releases some of its energy. The plate moves, the boundary accumulates, the locked interface stores, and periodically, in ways that no instrument currently deployed can predict, with the certainty that would allow you to tell the people of Miyako or Kamaishi or Rikuzentakata exactly which morning to leave and not come back. The fault slips. The question that every seismologist in Japan is sitting with right now is the same question that the seismologists of 2011 sat with on the morning of March 9th of that year. Because on March 9th, 2011, a magnitude 7, the earthquake struck the Sanriku coast, approximately 40 kilometers from where the main shock would rupture 51 hours later. 51 hours, 2 days, and 3 hours. The scientists who saw that magnitude 7, classified it as a principal earthquake. They assessed it, they monitored the aftershocks, and they reached the conclusion that a major seismic event had occurred and was now diminishing. They were not incompetent. They were not negligent. They were working with the best data available and applying the best scientific methods developed for exactly that scenario. And they were wrong in a way that the Earth does not apologize for. On March 11th, 2011, at 2:46 in the afternoon, the fault ruptured. Not just in the segment that had moved on March 9th, along a rupture zone approximately 400 kilometers long. The ground shook for 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Think about the last time you experienced 6 seconds of shaking and how that felt. Multiply that by 60. The coastline dropped by up to a meter in some locations, and the displacement of the seafloor sent a wall of water towards shore at the speed of a commercial aircraft. The waves that struck the Sanriku coast were not 3 meters. They were not even 10 meters. In some locations, they reached 40 meters, taller than a 12-story building, moving inland for distances that erased the distinction between the sea and the land entirely. 15,105 people died. Nearly 6,000 were injured. 130,000 buildings were completely destroyed. An entire nuclear power plant complex entered a state of crisis that took years to bring under any kind of control, and it was preceded by a magnitude 7. 2 earthquake 2 days before that, everyone initially thought was the main event. The JMA's advisory language from April 20th, 2026 explicitly references this sequence. Historical sequences cited in official materials include the March 2011 Tohoku earthquake, or a 7 point. 3 event occurred 2 days before the 9, 0 main shock. That sentence, in the measured institutional language of Japan's National Meteorological Authority, is the single most important thing that anyone on that coastline needs to read right now. It is not a prediction. The JMA was explicit about that. This is not a prediction. It is a probability assessment, and the probability has been elevated, which means that the April 20th earthquake may be exactly what it appears to be. A major seismic event along a very active subduction zone, diminishing now into aftershocks and the slow elastic rebound of a crust that has released some of its stored energy. Or it may be something else. It may be what March 9th, 2011 turned out to be. Consider the town of Kamaishi, Iwate Prefecture. Population approximately 32,000. Kamaishi sits on a narrow inlet on the Sanriku coast, surrounded on 3 sides by steep hills and open on the 4th to the Pacific Ocean. Before 2011, it had a harbor breakwater that held a Guinness World Record for depth, the deepest harbor breakwater on the planet, built specifically to protect this town from exactly the kind of wave that the Tohoku earthquake produced. The breakwater, all of it, every meter of that record-holding structure was overwhelmed. The wave that struck Kamaishi on March 11th, 2011 was roughly 10 meters high at the harbor entrance. It entered the city. It moved through it. It took 1,042 people. After 2011, Kamaishi rebuilt. New seawalls were constructed along the coast, some of them 14 meters high, walls of concrete and steel designed to give people more time, not to stop the ocean, but to slow it, to buy the seconds and minutes that the difference between life and death sometimes comes down to. On April 20th, 2026, the residents of Kamaishi felt the ground move beneath them and heard the sirens, and they did what they have been trained to do, what their grief has taught them to do. They moved to higher ground. They did not wait to see how large the wave would be. The wave that reached Kamaishi on April 20th was 40 centimeters, less than a foot and a half. The walls held. The people who moved survived. But here is what the residents of Kamaishi know, what they carry in their bodies, in a way that no newspaper article can fully convey. The walls that protect them were designed for a repeat of 2011. They were not designed for what a magnitude 9 earthquake along the same fault would produce. And the JMA advisory issued on April 20th, 2026, is describing precisely that possibility. Now understand what the two connected systems look like together, because the Japan Trench is not the only boundary in Japan that is accumulating stress. It is not even the one that Japanese disaster planners lose the most sleep over. That distinction belongs to the Nankai trough. The Nankai trough is a roughly 800-kilometer-long undersea trench running along Japan's Pacific coast from Shizuoka Prefecture, which sits southwest of Tokyo, all the way to the southern tip of Kyushu Island. It is where the Philippine Sea Plate is subducting beneath the Eurasian Plate at a rate that builds pressure along a locked fault interface with a 70 to 80% probability of producing a magnitude 8 to 9 earthquake within the next 30 years. 70 to 80%. That is not a 1 in 100 chance. That is closer to 3 in 4. And the Japanese government's updated damage projection for a Nankai trough megaquake, released in 2025, is not a number that can be read casually. It estimates 298,000 deaths, not in a war, not from a disease, from a single geological event. Of those 298,000 deaths, 215,000 would be caused directly by the tsunami. 215,000 people drowned by the Pacific Ocean because a plate boundary that has been storing energy since the 1940s finally releases it. The economic damage is projected at 270 trillion yen. That is approximately 8 trillion US dollars. Nearly half of Japan's entire annual GDP, destroyed in a single morning. The Nankai Trough produces paired earthquakes. The historical record shows major ruptures occurring roughly every 100 to 150 years in sequences where different segments of the fault slip in close succession. The last pair struck in 1944 and 1946, a magnitude 8, 0, in December 1944 along the eastern Nankai segment, followed by a magnitude 8, 1 in December 1946 along the western Nankai segment. That was 80 years ago. The historical recurrence interval is 100 to 150 years. The government knows this. The scientists know this. The disaster planners know this. And the 298,000 death projection is based on a worst-case winter evening scenario when people are inside, when they are not at work, when the heating systems are running and the cooking fires are lit, and the time between the shaking and the wave is not enough. In the worst-case scenario, tsunami waters could reach 10 meters or higher along stretches of the Shizuoka, Mai, and Kochi coastlines. Shizuoka Prefecture alone is projected to lose 101,000 people, one city's worth of human beings. And it is not the Japan Trench. It is not the system that produced the April 20th earthquake. It is a separate boundary, a separate locked fault, a separate accumulation of energy that has been building since 1946 and has not yet slipped. Two systems, one country. And the question that no seismologist on Earth can answer is whether they are connected in time. In August of 2024, Japan's government issued its first ever Nankai Trough megaquake advisory. It followed a magnitude 7, one earthquake off the coast of Miyazaki Prefecture, close to the Nankai Trough system. That advisory was not a prediction. The JMA was explicit about that. It was a probability assessment, a recognition that the system had spoken and that its speech warranted a formal governmental response. The advisory triggered panic buying of emergency supplies across southern Japan, event cancellations, business closures. And then the advisory was lifted. The system held. And the accumulated stress that has been building since 1946 continued building. It did not dissipate. It stored. That is what locked plate boundaries do. They are not indifferent to time. They are patient in a way that nothing built by human hands has ever been patient. They will wait 100 years. They will wait 300 years. And then they will not wait anymore. Think now about what two advisory windows running in the same country within the same recent memory mean for the people living in the middle of it. Japan has a population of approximately 124 million people. Virtually every one of them lives within reach of one subduction zone threat or another. The Japan Trench to the northeast, the Nankai Trough to the southwest, the Sagami Trough beneath Tokyo Bay, which has its own history of producing devastating earthquakes, most recently the magnitude 7, 9. Great Kanto earthquake of 1923 that killed over 100,000 people in Tokyo and Yokohama in a combination of shaking, fire, and tsunami. These are not theoretical boundaries on a map. They are the geological floor beneath one of the most densely populated and economically consequential societies ever built on the surface of this planet. And right now, as of April 22nd, 2026, the Japan Meteorological Agency's advisory for the Sanriku and Hokkaido coast is still active. It runs until April 27th, 5 more days. 5 days during which residents from Hokkaido to Chiba are being asked by their government to sleep with their emergency bags ready, to know their evacuation routes before they need them, to not go back to the beach, to remain vigilant in a way that human beings are biologically very bad at sustaining. Think about the city of Miyako in Iwate Prefecture, population roughly 50,000. Miyako sits at the mouth of a river valley on the Sanriku coast, one of those places where the land and the sea meet in a way that made the town possible and makes it permanently vulnerable. In 2011, the Heigawa estuary in Miyako became the subject of a photograph that was seen around the world. A wave from the Tohoku tsunami captured mid-arrival, a white wall of water moving up the estuary against the direction of the current, surreal and inexorable, swallowing the riverbanks. The people of Miyako watched that photograph of their own town for years afterward. They rebuilt, they raised the seawalls, they drilled their evacuation procedures. On April 20th, 2026, the tsunami that reached Miyako was 40 centimeters. The drills worked, the seawalls held. The people reached higher ground, and now they are waiting, with the advisory still in effect and the clock counting down to April 27th, to find out whether what happened on April 20th was the event, or whether it was March 9th, 2011. The monitoring infrastructure watching this system is extraordinary in its scope and deeply limited in its most critical function. Japan operates one of the most sophisticated earthquake monitoring networks in the world. The country has invested decades and billions of yen in early warning systems that can detect the initial P wave, the fast, less destructive compressional wave that precedes the slower, more devastating S wave, and broadcast alerts to phones, televisions, and loudspeakers across the country in the seconds between detection and impact. Those systems worked on April 20th. The alerts went out. The sirens sounded. People moved. The earthquake early warning system, operational since 2007, is genuinely one of the most successful pieces of disaster infrastructure ever built. It cannot prevent the earthquake. It cannot stop the tsunami, but it buys seconds. And in the calculus of survival on a coastline, seconds are lives. The Japanese government knows this precisely because 2011 showed what happens when warnings are slower than water. The government also operates the dense ocean floor network for earthquakes and tsunamis, DONET, a system of seafloor sensors connected by undersea cables that provide real-time data on seabed movement, pressure changes, and the early signatures of tsunami formation. DONET was expanded and improved after 2011. It is one of the most comprehensive submarine monitoring networks on the planet. And what all of that monitoring tells scientists right now is exactly what it has told them for decades. The system is accumulating. The boundary is locked. The April 20th earthquake released energy along one segment of the Japan Trench. But the broader interface between the Pacific Plate and the Okhotsk Plate, the zone capable of producing a magnitude 9 event, did not rupture on April 20th. The Pacific Plate is still moving westward at 8 to 9 centimeters per year. The locked fault is still locked. The stress budget of the interface is still being updated. And what those instruments, those sensors, those seafloor pressure gauges and GPS receivers and seismometers cannot tell anyone is what they most need to know. The monitoring is in place, detection is possible, prediction is not. No instrument currently deployed anywhere in Japan or anywhere in the world can tell the scientists watching their screens in Tokyo on the evening of April 22nd, 2026, whether the April 20th earthquake was a foreshock or a main shock. That is not a failure of technology. It is a fundamental constraint of physics. The difference between a foreshock and a main shock is not detectable at the time of occurrence. It is only visible in retrospect. You know a foreshock was a foreshock after the main shock arrives. Before that moment, every magnitude 7 earthquake looks exactly like a magnitude 7. 7-ter earthquake. The March 9th, 2011 magnitude 7. 2 earthquake looked exactly like a magnitude 7. 2 earthquake until March 11th, 2011 at 2:46 in the afternoon. And then it looked like something else entirely. The 1963 sequence near the Coral Islands, cited explicitly in the JMA's official advisory materials for the April 20th event, followed a pattern that should sit in every mind that is paying attention. A magnitude 7. 0 earthquake struck. Within approximately 18 hours, a magnitude 8. 5 earthquakes struck the same region. The smaller event was not the event. It was the warning. And 18 hours is a very small window in which to do anything with a warning you did not know you had received. The Japanese government's own worst-case modeling for a Japan trench megaquake, published in the government's disaster prevention guidelines, projects that a major earthquake in the Hokkaido Sanriku region could produce a tsunami up to 30 meters in height and could kill as many as 199,000 people. That is not a number from a catastrophist website or a disaster film. It is the number produced by the Japanese Cabinet Office using the same modeling methodologies that the JMA uses every day to issue its tsunami warnings. 199,000 people. and it could also destroy up to 220,000 houses and buildings and cause up to 31 trillion yen, roughly $200 billion in economic damage. Those projections describe the Japan trench system alone. They do not describe a simultaneous event on the Nankai trough. The question of what a compounded scenario would look like, what a Japan trench rupture does to a country that is simultaneously managing a Nankai trough event or a Sagami trough event, is a question that emergency management planners describe carefully in the language of contingency modeling and then stop describing because the answer exceeds the response capacity of any institution currently in existence. There is something else about the current moment that deserves more than a footnote. Japan is not only managing the seismic risk of April 20th, 2026, it is managing it 15 years after the earthquake that reshaped its entire national identity around preparedness. 2011 was not just a disaster for Japan, it was a generation-defining event. It produced a cultural and institutional recalibration around earthquake risk that touched everything from building codes to school curricula to the design of coastal infrastructure. The children who were in elementary school when the 2011 Tohoku earthquake struck are adults now. The survivors of Rikuzen Takata, the town on the Sanriku coast, where only a single pine tree was left standing after the tsunami, and which has since become a symbol of resilience, are still living with the weight of what they lost. The evacuation drills that sent tens of thousands of people to higher ground on April 20th, 2026, were the result of a lesson that cost 15,000 lives to learn. And the advisory that the JMA issued on April 20th, 2026, is the institutional expression of the understanding that the lesson is not finished, that the boundary is still there, that the plates are still moving, that the stress is still accumulating, that what happened in 2011 is not the end of the story. The scientists who monitor the Sanriku subduction zone are careful to say that the April 20th, 2026 earthquake is not a prediction of a larger event. They are careful to say that most qualifying magnitude, 7 earthquakes along this boundary, are not followed by larger ones. They are careful to say that the 1% probability they have assigned to a follow-on M8 or greater earthquake in the advisory window does not mean a 99% chance of safety. It means that the risk is elevated, that the baseline probability has been multiplied by 10, that the system has spoken in a way that their monitoring protocols, developed after 2011 specifically because of what they did not catch in time in 2011, require them to acknowledge officially and publicly and on the record. That careful language, spoken by people who watched the data on March 9th, 2011, and reached a conclusion that was technically defensible and tragically wrong, carries its own weight. It is the weight of 15,000 names. The advisory runs until April 27th, 2026. 5 more days as of this morning. In 182 municipalities stretching from the northern tip of Hokkaido south to Chiba Prefecture, residents are being asked to sleep lightly, to keep their shoes near the bed, to know the fastest route to the nearest designated shelter, to not ignore the sound of a siren just because the last siren was a drill or a false alarm or a wave that turned out to be only 80 centimeters. Because the difference between 80 centimeters and 40 meters is not a difference in kind, it is a difference in the amount of fault that slipped. And the fault that produced April 20th is embedded in a larger system that has not finished expressing itself. Somewhere off the Sanriku coast right now, the Pacific Plate is moving west. It is moving at between 7, 9, and 9. 2 centimeters per year toward the Japanese archipelago. It has been doing this for millions of years. It will continue doing this for millions more. The April 20th, 2026 earthquake released energy along one portion of that boundary, a portion that has ruptured before in 2011, in 1933, in 1896, and 869. The boundary holds geological memory in a way that human memory cannot fully access. It records its history in the chemistry of ocean sediments, in the layers of tsunami deposits found buried in coastal marshes along the Sanriku coast, in the oral traditions of communities that have lived on this shoreline for generations and have always known, in the way that people who live close to the earth often know things before the instruments confirm them, that the ocean is not finished. The Eneyoshi district of Miyako City has a stone tablet that was placed there by survivors of the 1933 Sanriku earthquake. It reads, "Do not build homes below this point." The stone tablet is still there. The warning is still legible. Below it, there are houses. The Japan Meteorological Agency's advisory expires on April 27th, 2026 at 5 in the afternoon. When it expires, the official elevated risk window will close. The JMA will note, as it noted after the December 2025 advisory, that the expiration of the advisory does not mean that earthquakes will not happen again. The Pacific Plate will still be moving. The locked interface will still be locked. The stress accumulated since 2011 and the stress accumulated since 1946 along the Nankai trough will still be there, stored in the elastic deformation of rock that has been waiting for longer than anyone reading this has been alive. The monitoring will continue. The instruments will keep recording. The The seafloor pressure sensors will keep measuring. And in the offices of the Japan Meteorological Agency in Tokyo, scientists who have dedicated their careers to understanding a system they can observe but cannot fully predict will keep watching their screens, knowing what the geological record shows and knowing what their instruments cannot yet tell them, which is not whether the next great earthquake along the Japan Trench will happen. It is which morning the people of Miyako and Kamaishi and Rikuzentakata will wake up to find that the quiet week was not a quiet week after all. The monitoring is in place. The detection is real. The data is clear. The seabed is moving. The plates are locked. The advisory is active. And somewhere between April 22nd, 2026, and the moment that the Pacific Plate finally decides that the stress has been stored long enough, 124 million people are living their lives on an archipelago that sits directly above the machinery of its own destruction, checking their emergency bags, confirming their evacuation routes, and hoping the way people always hope when the evidence tells them hoping is not enough, that the next siren is still a drill.